supporting the nomination of Councillor Strong as Vice Chair?
Point out, Chair, but I can't access Teams at the moment, so I can't vote.
But you can raise your hand.
I'll raise my hand for this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is for Councillor Strong. Okay, and thank you. Could we now have the Councillor Bond? You're at risk of supporting the second nominee as well. If you keep your hand.
Could you say how many that was, please? I can't hear.
Yes.
I couldn't hear.
Apologies, Councillor Bond. Yeah, that was 4.
Thank you.
Okay, so could we now have you please raise your hand in support of the nomination for Councillor Buckler?
Sorry, it's not going. Oh, it's gone now. Thank you.
So that's 4 as well.
There is a tie between the two candidates. That was 4 as well. I hope you heard Robert setting that out. So the chair has the casting vote, and I'd be very happy with either of 2 excellent councillors, but I'd ask Councillor Buckler if you would be prepared to be the Vice Chair for the coming year.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed, I would. And I look forward to working with you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for moving us through the first 2 items, and we'll move on to the item 3 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. And I have one, which is Councillor Fuchs. Robert, I believe that's the only apology.
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to declarations of interest, if there are any, and I see none. So thank you very much. We'll move on to the public open forum. And this is very much an opportunity for any member of the public just to remind members of the public that they're very welcome to raise issues with the committee, and if they would like to do so, they will find out how to do so on the website. And do welcome any inputs that members of the public would have. We will move on to item 6, and Robert, could I ask you to bring, I think, the cabinet member and the officers into the meeting for this. So this is the item on public protection performance for 2023-2024. to review the performance of this service. And really, it's important, I think, that not only we, but also any member of the public who may be watching this is aware that public protection comprises environmental health, trading standards, animal health, and licensing. And we welcome all of you to the meeting. Good to see you. It's David Jones, Hugh Owen, Alan Thomas, and Jen Walton. And if I could ask at the first opportunity, as you settle into the meeting, perhaps just to identify yourself for members of the public on the first time you speak. Thank you. I wasn't sure if Councillor Sandals was joining us, Robert. We'll just wait whilst we bring Councillor Sandals into the meeting. Welcome, Councillor Sandals. I don't know if you wanted to come up front or if you, wherever you prefer, but yeah. Welcome to the meeting. Great. So we'll thank you first of all for attending the meeting. It's extremely important that you do, as the officers and also the cabinet member, because apart from anything else, this is such an important area. It's an important area not only for the committee but for everybody in the county to really have a good understanding of what public protection means in terms of environmental health, trading standards, animal health and licensing, amongst the other things. And amongst those other things, it's very clear that the colleagues in front of us and colleagues who are within the services in the period of 2020 through to early 2023 were extraordinarily involved in supporting the entire county during the pandemic, which we hear about as once in a century, and let's hope that is the case. And we've previously put on record our appreciation to everyone in the service for all the extraordinary work that was done in that period of time, and also liaising with members of the public and community groups. It was extraordinary. The great thing is we're now moving on to a report which is, in its the framing of the report, very clear that it's the first period for the last 3 years where you've not had a pandemic getting in the way. And that's extremely good to know about. So I don't know if Councillor Sandals, you wanted to introduce the report and then pass across to David Jones, and we'll ask you to highlight key issues and then move on to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and members of this Scrutiny Committee. I'll keep my introduction brief, as we've officers in attendance that will summarise the annual performance report and take member questions. As exemplified in the report, I'm sure members will agree that officers in this division pick up a very diverse range of services that are so important to our residents, local businesses and visitors to our county. The purpose of the report is to highlight what the public protection teams have achieved in the 2023-2024 year, and your comments and observations are welcomed. Indeed, as per recommendation 2.2 of the covering report, officers can present a further report on a specific subject area, should that be helpful to members. I'll now hand over to David, who can summarise some of the main points in both the covering and annual report as circulated to all committee members. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sandals, and on to David Jones. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sandals, for that introduction, and thanks, members of the committee. So my name's David Jones, Head of Public Protection. As the Chair's outlined, for purposes of this report, 2 teams within environmental health, 1 team in licensing and training standards and animal health. There's a 5th team, the registration service, and we'll get to that under the next agenda item. But in terms of purposes of public protection, within the local government family, it does tend to pick up those services. So I won't dwell on the covering report, Chair. Just to say it follows a similar format to previous years. I think helpfully it compares to years gone by, and as the Chair outlines, we've got a pre-pandemic year to look at, 1920, 3 years, 2 years were obviously completely pandemic, and then 22-23 we describe as a recovery year because we did disband, which is in the report, the incident management team for COVID in May of that year. So actually this last year, as the Chair's outlined, is pretty much the business as usual. So hopefully, having looked at across 5 years, you can see certain trends, which is hopefully helpful to people to understand what we're doing and how we try and prioritise those services. So recommendations are outlined, obviously for any members' questions, 2.1, and as Councillor Sandals has outlined, if there is anything else that members would want to specifically look at, we'd welcome that. As in 3.1, we did look at the pandemic response in March last year, if members recall that. No, last March, should I say. Which is obviously quite an extensive piece of work that Public Protection were actively engaged in. So I don't really want to pick up anything else in the covering report. If I can focus on the report proper, obviously we won't read this out verbatim, we'll be here for a while, but I'll just pick up some specific points. The Chair's outlined what the services it covers. I think helpfully we sit within social care and health. We very much see it as a people service. It is about health and well-being. So we have been in different directorates, but I think that's a line of good fit. There's synergy between what we do and our colleagues in social care. In terms of purpose, I think we do align well with the purpose of the local authority, protecting people from harm, a cleaner environment, obviously very pertinent currently, the food chain, and that's not just our local takeaways and restaurants that Alan will talk us through. It is about from farm to fork, so we do cover off those aspects which are very important to people. There are linkages obviously to the community and corporate plan, which we won't go through, but certainly obviously a safe place to live. We cover where people work as well, also a green place to live and a thriving and ambitious place in terms of working with the trade to ensure level playing fields aspects to how we go about our services. Resources, that's what we got. I would suggest a lot of output from a relatively small teams, as outlined in 3.1. 3.2, the financial resource, that's as per each of those 4 teams. There's a 5th one there, which is the management generic costs. That's head of service costs, software costs, anything that doesn't sit specifically within a team. And that's where the overspend was last year, which hopefully I've explained in the next paragraph. So there was a slight overspend, which represents 2.2% of the total public protection budget. Performance, I think I said this last year, we are quite heavily governed by external auditors and governing bodies. 4.2 describes a few of those, for example, the Food Standards Agency, Health and Safety Executive, Drinking Water Inspectorate, our professional body, Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, Welsh Government and other organisations. So they do take an active interest in what services we deliver and our levels of performance. So I think I'll probably stop there. Just in terms of probably one of the most interesting things I like to think is the table that we provide. So that goes through the 5 years. And I think if you look at the pre-pandemic year of 1920, not 1920 as in 2019/20, as opposed to the one that's over 100 years ago, that if you compare that with last year's performance, there are some similarities there. So we've obviously either had a dip, particularly proactive visits, or we've had an increase in some of the service requests when the pandemic occurred. So I think it's helpful to look back 5 years to make those comparisons and comparisons over the years. But I won't steal the thunder of my colleagues. I should have said chair at the beginning. If we could particularly focus perhaps on environmental health, because we've got the 2 principals for environmental health officers with us. There's also Chris Williams, but we have got Alan and Hugh with us. So I think it might be helpful if members particularly focus on the environmental health. Certainly, I'll try and field questions on train stands and licensing, but just so we know that we've got the principals in tow. So I'll stop there briefly, Chair, if that's okay, and I'll hand over to Alan Thomas. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Alan Thomas, I'm a Principal Environmental Health Officer in the Public Protection team. My team is involved with food safety, health and safety, and communicable disease investigations. In food, like Dave said earlier, we've had a bit of a bumpy ride since COVID. During COVID, all the businesses closed down and we weren't able to go and visit them. So there was quite a backlog when we came back after COVID. The Food Standards Agency that Dave mentioned, one of our regulators came up with a recovery plan, which had us inspecting all of the high-risk premises by the end of March last year, which we achieved. And it was a great effort by the team to get to that point. There is a bit of a backlog on lower risk premises. They tend to be the sort of village halls and snacks for after school clubs and that kind of thing, kind of lower risk packed foods and things like that. So we've got a bit of backlog there that we're catching up on. But as you can see from the figures in the table that David mentioned, we're back to pretty much pre-pandemic numbers now, so we're hoping to catch up with those lower risk ones as well. We did 551 inspections of high-risk premises, and we achieved those 100% for the time that's set out in the Welsh Code of Practice for food inspections. Interesting that this, like 97% of those were what we call broadly compliant. Broadly compliant means they achieve at least a 3 on the food hygiene rating scheme, you know, the score on the door. Other interventions that we do, things like revisits, complaint visits and that sort of thing, we did 343 of them. So 894 visits to food premises in all during the 22-23 year. Sorry, 23-24, sorry. Also, we deal with health and safety, which in commercial businesses. That is driven by project work nowadays. And over the last year, we've been doing electrical safety and gas safety in the premises we visit. So it tends to be food premises, pubs and restaurants, cafes, that sort of thing. And we've done 60 of those, and it's a sort of hazard spotting, but also we've got pro formas that we use for inspecting gas safety and electrical safety. We also deal with event safety. The ESAG committee that David chairs, we're a very active member of that, probably one of the most active, I'd say, looking at events in the county, advising on safety, crowd safety, risk assessments, stewarding, lighting, all those things that can have an effect on the safety of an event. Places like Chepstow Racecourse is busy for us. We've got some big events coming on there in the summer. Communicable disease is another element of my team's work. We had an extremely busy time over COVID, as you can see from the figures. But we're getting back to what we think is more normal numbers now. We investigated 249 cases of notifiable disease over the period. And again, there is a set time period for response. For example, an E. coli, which is a high-risk notification, it's got to be done within 4 hours. We've got to get hold of try and get to speak to the person who's unwell or their parent or guardian. Other diseases such as Salmonella, Campylobacter has a slightly longer time period for response there, but we managed to get all them done in time as well. That's about it, really, from myself. As for the commercial side of environmental health, I think Hugh's going to tell you more about the public protection side now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Al Thomas. Hugh Owen, Principal EHO for the Public Health Team, as Alan has explained. The work covered by my team is detailed largely in 5.2 of the report. Great opportunity for committee meetings such as this to present what work our team does, to listen to members and to discuss our performance. So for 23-24 period, we dealt with a total of 2,675 service requests. This was a 7.6% increase from 22-23, where we had 2,485. There is a chart in 5.2.7, which deals with our total inquiries. As we can see, there's a gradual increase. In fact, quite dramatic. If you compare to 1920, we had close on 1,950 service requests. So that's risen by approximately 750 over a period of 4 years, which is a 37% increase. So one thing the team has got to do is very carefully prioritise the very important elements of work that we need to do. And just to highlight some of those for members, my team deal with private sector housing enforcement. The members perhaps only tend to hear private sector housing enforcement when something goes wrong. The work that my team is involved in liaison with tenants and landlords is to try and make sure we don't get to that position. So typically we respond to complaints regarding poor housing conditions. So in 23-24, this resulted in 39 inspections of rented properties. So what does that mean? 39 inspections. Well, we identified 80 hazards, significant hazards. 26 of them were Category 1, so very serious hazards. 54 what we would consider to be Category 2 hazards. Good 50% of those hazards were to what you may expect: damp, cold, excess cold, fire safety issues. Again, we always challenge ourselves, what does that mean? Well, there were 78 adults and 34 children exposed to those 80 hazards. We worked closely with landlords. To date, by the end of the 23-24 period, we had protected 24 adults, 17 children for removal of those hazards. But inevitably, the work rolls on into the next year. We've got a suite of enforcement powers available to us. But again, the essence of what we try and do is work with landlords, get them on board, and the vast majority, great to say, in Monmouthshire certainly do cooperate. Having said that, we did have to serve 3 prohibition orders during that period, and a prohibition order basically says, well, this dwelling, given the hazards here, can't be lived in, can't be occupied, needs to be vacated. That's very much reactive work. There's plenty of scope in the housing, private rented sector to do proactive work. We did a scheme 10 years or so ago, which we're really keen to pick up again, which is to look at housing above takeaways, which we know perhaps have a tendency to be occupied by particularly vulnerable people, and you've got the hazards of fire safety, etc. there tend to be predominant. So something that we're keen to pick up on this coming year. Moving on, noise complaints. Noise complaints is a very important element of the work we do. I did last year report on a case where we had to get a warrant on 2 occasions to seize equipment. Well, 23-24 actually saw us take that case to court for prosecution of the individual and resulted in the individual being fined, including costs, close on £2,500. I would like to draw members' attention to the very positive feedback we had in 5.2.2 from a resident who's taken, from one of the affected residents, who's taken time to convey their gratitude, in effect, for the work that our officer did in that particular case. Other than in dealing with noise, we do a lot of proactive work. We're in festival season, as Al mentioned earlier, so we work with the likes of Chepstow Racecourse and our big festival organisers to try and make sure that these events go on, and we welcome the events in Monmouthshire, but hopefully minimising the impact on nearby residents. Moving swiftly on, environmental protection. This covers abandoned vehicles, also fly tipping, which is, I know, always close in members' thoughts. We've started to pick up now on our investigations post-COVID. Bearing in mind, an investigation very often involves opening bags of refuse, etc. So we've got... We're working closely with Newport and Torvine on a case which has been in court, and it will be going to sentencing later this year, which was for 4 incidents. And we've got close on another 5 or so incidents, which are in a pipeline, reaching a sharp end for decision making for enforcement action. Couple of things just in going on beyond the report. We will collaborate very closely with other sections in the department. For example, over 350 planning consultations we were involved in, close on 50 consultations with licensing. As a principal officer, a lot of work coming through the team. I've always got to consider about staff morale. How do you judge that? Well, one of the indicators surely has to be sickness rates. I think that's recognised. Our continuing excellent low sickness rate continues. For a team of 8 officers, just 12.5 sick days off for 23-24. That's for the whole team of 8 officers. Managed to generate £37,000 of income. What do the public think of us? Very difficult to try, given our enforcement role, to do customer feedback, etc. But we had dealing with over 2,600 service requests, just 3 formal complaints, and 12 very positive feedbacks. Finish on one happy note, hopefully, that the air quality in the county continues to improve, and we've got 2 air quality management areas in Usk and Chepstow, which are related to nitrogen dioxide traffic emissions. I'm really pleased to say that the work of environmental health primarily is monitoring air quality. 23-24 was the 4th year where we did not have an exceedance anywhere in the county for the annual objective level for nitrogen dioxide. So that's really good news. We're heading, hopefully, and I'm sure we will get another a good year in Usk. Next year, then, we should be hopefully revoking the air quality management area in Usk. So all that is moving in the right direction. And again, that's from closely collaborating with our colleagues in planning, active travel, and the highways department to try and do our bit to secure the improvements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I wondered before we open for questions, and I'd ask colleagues to. Sorry, David, did you want to?
A few more minutes.
Certainly. It was a particular question while we were just finishing with just a really brief one, if I may. The current E. coli outbreak across the country, are we aware of any resident in Monmouthshire who's been affected by that? Just a real quick one before we move on to the next.
There are a couple of cases of E. coli on the go at the moment. I know one came in last night, but there's no direct link, as far as we know at the moment, to any of what's going on. We're aware, of course, of the withdrawal of sandwiches across several large supermarkets at the moment. That came in on Friday, but when we investigate very quickly and very thoroughly, and obviously we're asking, if the people have been consuming sandwiches. Where did they get them from, or whether they were from these potentially affected retailers. Of course, it was voluntary action that they took on Friday, I understand, but we don't know much more than that at the moment. We don't have any very definite evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I just thought while we were, just covering those areas that I'd just pop that quick one in. David, back to you, and then we'll open for questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious you want to move to questions, so I'll keep it brief. Just in terms of training standards, animal health and licensing, those are highlighted in sections 5.3 and 5.4. Just I think Hugh reflected on partnership working. We don't work in isolation. I think if you read those sections, it's very much about working with the police on initiatives with our licensed trade, for example. The taxi businesses, obviously critical for a safe environment in the county. They are dealing with vulnerable people. They did an admirable job throughout the pandemic, and we work very closely with them and pub watch schemes, etc. The other bit of assurance probably for members would be the internal audits that focused on animal health. We did touch on training standards as well. At the end of section 5.4, reasonable assurance is positive, as they were happy with those general, how we manage risks and manage that animal health service. That's reflected in the report. I won't mention event safety group. It does take an awful lot of time. It's 124 events that we have commented on. And those can be quite time consuming. We've also got big venues such as Chepstow Racecourse and some of the others, when they can be a bit more contentious, can generate quite a lot of traffic, shall we say, in terms of calls and emails. Local toilet strategy, something I've been leading on. I see Anne Webb on the call. She knows all about that. We won't touch upon that, but it's scrutinised annually. It is a requirement now to have a strategy. So again, that's a good example probably of partnership working across various departments of the local authority to get to an end result of improving that stock over time. So the summary is there for members. Hugh mentioned prioritisation. How do we deal with this uplift in requests for our services? And it's about prioritisation, trying to modernise our software system to assist staff out in the field. So we are progressing that now. We will be moving, licensing will be the first ones to work to the new system, and we think cash payments, etc., it should speed things up. So we're very much about trying to free up officer time for that. Partnership working I reflected on already, not just internal, Gwent Police, close liaison with them, and also health colleagues, PHW and Aaron Bevan Health Board. I think that was probably reflected more probably in the pandemic response report last March, but we want to develop that going forward. Scrutiny, there are different mechanisms, including this. We do welcome that, as usual. And I've reflected on the fact that we are getting back to that business as usual going forward. Innovative work, and as I mentioned too, I think training standards have picked up this whole issue of animal licensing Wales. We host that, which is a real positive thing. Special procedures work, we do put our heads over the parapet and say we'll provide the national register, and that's going well, and we're looking to get that implemented. Obviously, it's a Welsh Government under the Public Health Wales Act, but we have been leading some of that work for colleagues nationally, and that will be coming in October, November time later this year. I just put in 6.6. I think it's important to remember we're here to help and assist the public, be it they've got salmonella poisoning or something. They complain about food premises. On Hugh's side, they've got problems with neighbours, etc., noise nuisance. These are very important issues. On the training standards and consumer protection, scams, vaping, it's more like an A to Z of issues we deal with. And I think it's important to reflect that that's obviously the key priority of the service, is to provide and help assist. As per Councillor Sandal's introduction, it's about members of the public, it's about local businesses, and it's about visitors to the county. So I think I'll probably stop there, Chair. Section 7 is as stated, just a sort of a look forward, if you like, in terms of how do we pursue those partnerships, collaborative working opportunities. We have got some examples. The other thing I'd probably reflect just before I finish is the positive stories that are peppered in the report. There's one about a local bakery set up under section 5.1. So I think it's good to actually have some feedback directly from those businesses we engage with. So that was just an example of thanks ever so much. We probably couldn't have proceeded without that assistance. So just to make that point, it's not big stick territory. It's about working with and collaborating with others for an effective service. And there's also one on Hugh's side of the business as well. So I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I think you emphasised there right at the end that the service is very much about protecting the public and helping the public. And I think that's something that clearly comes through in the report. I'm going to open for questions, and if I could just remind committee members, please put your hand up in the Teams box. If you are completely stuck, then of course raise your hand wherever you are. I'm going to ask Councillor Strong, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the team for that report. It's always an interesting one to read. 3 questions, if I may. You mentioned in relation to noise a couple of court cases, but it also says in the report about a warrant that allowed you access to a premises to seize equipment. Now, was that warrant actually executed? And I'm particularly concerned there with the safety of our own workers. How do we ensure that? Do you have police protection? So that's the first question. The second one is, I think, for Hugh, relates to the public spaces protection order, the dog exclusion zones. Came into force 1st of June, but as I understand, or to the best of my knowledge, signs aren't in place yet. Really want reassurance that while on the one hand, we will take enforcement seriously, because it is an important public health issue. On the other hand, it will be applied with common sense. I've had, for example, queries about exactly where borders run, not always inch clear on the scale of the maps we've got, and indeed, no prosecutions would take place until signs are up. That sort of thing. And thirdly, David referred to your A to Z of issues that you have to deal with, and yet you've got a team of only 8 people to deal with it. I mean, that begs the question of, the width of expertise that's required to deal with what issues might come across, and I'd be interested in how you deal with that. If I could raise a hypothetical case, say, for example, you get a member of the public contact you about the use of allegedly illegal weed killer in an area that's public or semi-public, or at least the public in reality have access to. How would you deal with that? Would you have expertise in-house, or do you bring in people? How do you deal with that sort of huge range that you have to cope with? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. I don't know, David, who wants to tackle those questions?
Thanks, Councillor Strong. Hugh, we'll start with 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then I'll do number 3.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Strong. Noise, yeah, it's the prosecution case I mentioned earlier was the case that we also went to get a warrant. So just to take members through the process, which was quite an exceptional case because of 300-400 noise complaints we get every year. It is a matter of speaking to the source. It's speaking to the alleged source of the problem. It's about a matter of speaking to the complainants and trying to get the matters resolved without going to court. But in this particular case, music, your typical nightmare scenario, music pounding away night on night, regular basis. We serve a noise abatement order, which is a formal warning saying if this carries on in breach of this order, you'll be liable for prosecution. Problems continued in breach of that order. So what does the council do? Yeah, we can apply to court for a court date to prosecute the offender. However, in the meantime, as we know, it can take some time getting dates in court. The music problems continue. People are disturbed. So we apply to court for a warrant in order to seize the equipment. Our officer, in this sort of situation, would judge the case and inevitably get the attendance of the police who will be present. The role of the police really is to make sure that public disorder doesn't continue on, but the safety of all involved is paramount. In this particular case, both warrants were exercised and the equipment was seized according to plan. And then at a later date, we went for prosecution. So members quite right. Again, with lone working for festivals, etc. It's something that we have to take into account. The PSPO, yes, it's been a process going through the last couple of years. I did have in my notes actually to mention the PSPO and what we did going through 23-24, the public consultation, going through scrutiny committees, but I was mindful of time. It was approved by Cabinet on the 10th of April, with commencement on the 1st of June. So where are we now? Enforcement starts with raising awareness. That's got to be the first part of the PSPO, raising awareness and that nudge effect of changing behaviour. And let's face it, only changing the behaviour of a minority of people, the vast majority of dog owners do exactly what they should in public spaces. But the early months or the summer months coming now, it's going to be about signposting areas that high footfall, so town centre locations, etc., to make people aware of a requirement to pick up dogs if I was a public space, to carry dog bags with them. We've got 200 exclusion leads only areas. 200 exclusion and leads only areas. 180 of them are exclusion, 20 are leads only. Each of those has to be signposted, clearly stating that a public space protection order is in place. So that's going to be rolled out over the next few months. It's going to be led by the grounds and waste section by Carl Tuwick's team. And then with regards to enforcement, yes, there's a number of authorised officers. So everybody in my team, so that's 8 officers authorised. It's going to be intelligence led initially. So when we get complaints from members of the public, or I still chair the Give Dog Phone and Red Card committee, which got a really good working relationship with town and community councils. So when we get to the complaints, and I'm expecting them to be few and far between, bearing in mind the raising awareness that we'll be doing, then we'll have to deal with those as they arise. We've got 8 officers authorised to date, and there's going to be a litter and parking review authorisation is going to be picked up as part of that later in the year, again led by Carl Tuwick's team. Hopefully that's helped answer those questions, Carl.
Thank you, Hugh. And David, I think you're going to pick up the third question.
Yeah,
Nuclear is the example used.
Yeah, sure. So third element, I think, was about staff resource. Just to be clear, 3.1 picks up, I think you're thinking more about Hugh's team when you're talking about 8-9 staff. But if you look at 3.1, the entirety into the table, picking up train stands and else, that's as outlined in 3.1. the total staff within that public protection teams of within the 4 teams, 37 officers, of which 34 FTEs. So, yeah, but still, even with that resource, it is quite a volume of work to get through, as reflected by colleagues. And then the thing about illegal weed killers is a good question, isn't it? Depends where it is, really. So I think that'll be part of the investigation. So, for example, is it residential, business use, public space? Is it MCC land? We'd liaise with grounds, etc., to perhaps section that off. Who's the landowner? We'd probably liaise with HSE if it was coming from a workplace, for example. NRW, it could be affecting watercourses, etc. Public Health Wales in terms of the health of the actual public and health advice to those people in the vicinity. So it all depends very much about where it is, and the magnitude of it would form part of the investigation. And we'd act accordingly with, I think it'd be quite a good example of partnership working, that where we do have those sort of examples, we do work swiftly with colleagues. It can be a frustration sometimes. There's a case in Caldecott estate. What are we doing? So that's NRW and HSE. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there as to what we can't obviously step into an enforcement role that we haven't got powers to do so. So we're very careful to investigate closely and take it down the right channel then. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And Councillor Strong, I don't know if you wanted to follow up.
Thanks on all three. I mean, on that last one. So it's a matter of really of liaising with other agencies rather than calling in contractors or whatever. Yeah.
We really do have a network of teams we work with. It's a great point. For residents who are not familiar with the acronyms, if we could just try and avoid them, NRW, Natural Resources Wales, is a key part of that framework. But thank you very much, Councillor Strong. Councillor Buckler, I see your hand next.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for this report. It's full of fascinating detail. The first sort of point I'd like to make, it's about sort of food standards. And do you see a difference in businesses you go and look at before the pandemic and after the pandemic? Is there a shift? And how involved do you get when things are unsatisfactory, and what measures do you take? Regarding Hugh, the sort of landlords sort of renting and unsatisfactory accommodation, do you offer a service to give advice to potential landlords? How is it flagged up that properties are being rented, and is there a structure in place to try and stop these problems? Because obviously the last thing any of us want are families and people living in conditions that you wouldn't want families to be living in. Fly tipping. Do you see a correlation in the fact that you now have to have an appointment to go to the recycling and rubbish depots? Do you feel that there could be things that could be looked at again? And just the very last point is on the animal health visits, what proportion are farm visits? What proportion are residential? And sort of what...
Okay, we're going to have to temporarily curtail the meeting and leave the chamber. If you could just take your immediate things with you. Oh,
What's happening? What's happening?
We'll leave the
What's happening?
We'll leave the chamber now. Thank you.
Is it a fire alarm?
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Bond, isn't it?
Thank you
Doesn't
very
sound like a
much.
drill, so we're going to have to leave.
Okay, see you soon. Thank you.
Jill, I wouldn't want to stop the streaming, but if we can all make sure our mics are off, then the stream will be effectively carrying on until we get back. Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
has kept, the live stream going, just muted whilst we've. Brilliant. So you should be able to hear us again now. Hi there again, Paul. We just had a walk around the car park, and the building is declared safe. I was just saying it's obviously set up by public protection, so we fully appreciate their services, but we saw that coming. Okay, we're going to do a restart now, and if I may apologise first of all for the break for anybody watching. We had a fire alarm which is now resolved, and we're back to where we broke off abruptly, which was with Rachel, with Councillor Buckler's questions and the issues relating to that. So were you ready to pick up those questions? Was there anything, Councillor Buck, you wanted to add?
No, I'd literally just finished, so
Exactly.
answers, please.
Answers, please. So, okay. So did you want to pick up, did you note the questions or? Thank you. Thanks very much. So over to you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
You asked if we saw a difference before and after COVID in the standards. Yes, I think it's a short answer. We think there was a slip in standards. People hadn't been seen for they'd missed a cycle of inspections. So it was a bit more work than usual, and we had a backlog to deal with as well. But the way we approached it is that people had a tough time through the pandemic, so we worked with them to get the standards back. If you look at the percentages of broadly compliant they're roughly the same before and after. So it was a bit more involved, a bit more difficult really. We spent a lot more time with businesses, bearing in mind what they'd been through to get them back to where they should have been. You asked, how far do we go? What do we do when we find bad premises? Well, we've got a huge range of options, really, from prosecution through to just advice. Really, it depends how bad it is. If it's an imminent risk to the public, then we've got powers to close places down. We don't use them very often. Very often, if there are things that need immediate attention, we work with the business and get their cooperation. Most of the time when places have to close, it will be through a voluntary arrangement. I think I've done one closure order through the courts in my time here, 17 years. It was a serious one and we didn't trust them to stay closed, so we took the business to court and made sure they stayed closed while the work went on. We've got notices that we can use, so if there are for example, structural things that need doing, we can serve notices on them, which just means you've got to get it done within a certain period of time. If it's repairs, for example, to structure or training or some documentation, we can make sure that that's done in a certain amount of time. Again, we prefer to work with people and agree with them and help them as we go along. That's the whole approach from our team in Monmouthshire. That's it really. If that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Liz, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Buckler, you asked two further questions, I believe. What advice do we give to landlords? How do we know if properties are rented? So in Wales, we've got Rent Smart Wales. Really fortunate. Things have been going 7-8 years now. And that really is the advisory forum for landlords and indeed tenants. All properties in Wales need to be registered. All rental properties in Wales need to be registered, and the landlord's either licensed or to manage the properties or to have a managing agent for them. When we get engaged with landlords, of course, we give them advice as to the standards that we feel need to be met, and we work for them, as opposed to, other than in a few exceptional cases, go straight into enforcement action. So that's how it tends to hopefully cover our point regarding work with landlords. Flight tipping, Councillor Buckler, you asked if we found a correlation between appointments at our civic community sites with flight tipping. Not something that we've seen. It's not something that's come out of our interviews of flight tippers that we've carried out over the years. I have to say there's always some sort of control in place with civic community sites as to when you can and when you can't take your waste, but ultimately there can't be no excuse for flight tipping. If somebody's got the tendency to do that, they will look for excuses. But ultimately, if you're going to fly tip your waste, domestic waste or commercial waste, to avoid the fees payable in our town centres, rural landscapes, etc., then you're going to do it if you've got that tendency to do it. So no strong correlation that we found to date.
Chair, I think the fourth question is animal health visits. So 269 last year. The vast majority will be farm visits. So RSPCA tend to deal with the domestic issues. There might be a few, we do obviously animal licensing. So there might be some pet shops and boarding establishments visits within that, but the vast majority will be farm visits. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the clear responses on that. And moving on to Councillor Bond.
Hi, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much. I'll echo what Councillor Neil said. The report evidence a lot of great work that's been done and the improvements that you've done and the recovery since COVID. So thank you very much for the report and all the work you're doing. There's a few little, there's a typo, I think, on page 1. It says performance and oversight instead of performance and overview, but that's tiny, obviously. But the questions around, you mentioned page 7, financial generic costs. You said it was around management and IT, but it's quite a significant difference to what was predicted. I wonder if you could explain a bit more about that, please. And the explanation, and you've added some explanation. Thank you for that. And then pages 9 to 15. Great information, and obviously done a lot of work, and there's some areas where you say that there's improvement needed. So wonder what the best practice is. You've given the number of cases often or performance in percentage, but how is that best practice versus other counties of a similar size or equivalent size or equivalent population, as I said, size? And so it's not just the numbers, but how are we rating versus other groups? And it said the closures weren't so good on the environmental protection orders. I wonder what that reason is. Did you explain that? I'm not sure you have. And when they close, is it related to customer satisfaction? Are the customers happy that that's finished? And do you get this like a sign off or an agreement? Because it's all about us delivering to customers, of course, isn't it? So really around best practice, and you've got percentages, but what are the targets? And also the resources you've got. You've mentioned about the budget and difficulties. Have we got the capacity? I know I'm doing a lot of work with the environmental health around enforcement at the moment. Have we got the capacity and the resource versus the risk and the budget, please? Also, what the all additional complaints on page 18, please? And could you explain the feed on page 25, 5.4.1, the feed issue and the toilet strategy? Just a reminder that Councillor Pavio brilliantly brought up last year about stoma supporting facilities. Wonder if that's any part of your review that you're doing. Thank you very much. That's quite a lot. Thank you.
It was rather a lot, Councillor Bond. We normally try and hold it to 3 questions. So if you could, give brief responses to these, please, because we are going to have to move on to the next report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Bond. Yeah, there's quite a lot there. I think it's overview. It's overview, isn't it, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. So I printed it out and it says overview on the top. So I think we're right.
Oh no, on page 1 it says oversight. Sorry. Did I not say that properly? It says oversight instead of overview on page 1.
Okay, I think that's a matter we can just make sure, but let's move on.
Right, moving on. Yeah, in terms of just quickly, I think hopefully the narrative on the overspend, specifically on the management costs, resulted in my post was taken out of the structure and then reintroduced. So that explains the cost there, which is a slight overspend, isn't it? 39,000, which is 2.2% of the total spend. So I don't have much more to add to that. I think there's substantive questions about best practice. How do we compare to others? But I think if you look at performance under section 4, that gives you an outline of all the governing bodies. So the FSA will rightly compare Monmouthshire's performance against Torfaen, Pembrokeshire, nationally across Wales. Rule of thumb, we generally compare well. They do quartile figures, etc. How many food standards visits we've done, etc. Similarly, the Health and Safety Executive, CIEH. So we have got comparative figures. We do participate in expert panels, be it air quality, contaminated land, all the stuff that we deal with specifically. And there's also Environmental Health Wales, which would pick up those performance things for comparative purposes. And that applies also to licensing and training standards as well. So I think we have got comparative figures. I think there's a couple of questions probably for Colin.
Chair. Yeah,
Yes.
I totally agree, and I'm sure that you have. But for the residents and for people like myself who are not over the comparisons, please could you add them to the report so we can see where we stand versus other comparable groups?
But we'd have to have some sort of scope to that because we'll be there for a fair old time when you get into the detail of how many ESAGs have we got compared to Torfaen. Perhaps some key, welcome perhaps if members want to drill down to a specific area. I think it'd be difficult to go to the table and compare that as a national figure in terms of where we sit.
So for example, broadly compliant food businesses, we're at 96.9. What's the best practice? What's the normal? What's everybody else in Wales and in the UK doing? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass to Alan Thomas on that one.
Actually, David, the point is not how are we doing on 6.9. The point is how do we know if 6.9 is good, bad, or something else? So I don't want to get drawn down a rabbit hole about any one number. The question I think that Councillor Bond is raising, and I know that we had some discussion with colleagues in the pre-meeting, is how can we assess whether we're performing well or how we're performing? And obviously we want to see our services performing well. So I think the way through this will be to actually for us to be able to itemize which areas we would like to see some comparative information, and that comparative information is something that would be useful to understand what you would be comparing with. Ultimately, it could be other areas, similar areas of the country. It could be in broader UK, not just previous years within Monmouthshire, because that still takes you down our kind of rabbit hole if I continue with that metaphor. So it's just to understand how things are performing. I think, Councillor Bond, that's your point, if I understand it correctly. So
absolutely,
we'll see if we could just compare what areas that we think are particularly important. Yes, but please.
Just very briefly.
Please do, yes.
There are the results of audits by the Food Standards Agency are published. We haven't been audited for a while, but the audits are ongoing by the Food Standards Agency, and you can see comparisons then with how local authorities are performing there. I think that'd be one way of doing it. Maybe we could include that in the next report.
Okay, that's very helpful. Now let's move on, if we may, and see if we can address the other points that Councillor Bond raised.
Sorry, I sort of lost some of it.
Do you want me to remind you? Sorry. So when it was about environmental protection order closures, is it checked and it's a bit lower? Why that is, you think? And also, or perhaps you've explained that already. And what constitutes a closure? Do you talk to the customer themselves to see whether it should be closed? Then it is knows all additional complaints on noise on page 18, and then the feed on page 25, 5.4.1, please explain.
Okay, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bond. The environment protection. So I assume you're talking about the main we've got, and in particular 440 cases closed within 3 months, 71.1%, and how that compares to the previous years. Yeah, it's. Is that the only indicator? No, it's certainly not. It's a statistic. I would encourage members to look at our service plans, which are available, which provide more detail on each of these matters. Again, our team has to effectively prioritise. So, for example, in the environment protection world, that may cover dogfowl and may cover littering, fly tipping, complaints, abandoned vehicles. Our VHOs cover a district. In that district work, in a typical week, there may be housing complaints. There may be a whole host of different complaints, and our officers then have to juggle what they're going to give priority to. So I can't give you the answer why it's slightly down on previous years. What I will ask members to note is that our general service requests throughout the year have increased. And inevitably, there has to be some impact on prioritisation. My work in particular, I've concentrated certainly in the last few months, as Councillor Strong mentioned, on a public space protection order. While doing that, other work has had to be held in abeyance. I wasn't too sure of the point, Councillor Bond, that you were making about noise.
Okay, so I would just I haven't quite answered the other question. I understand that. So it's too broad a thing. You can't. That 71.1 really doesn't indicate, because it's such a varied thing you do. So do you consult with the customer when you close a case?
Yes. So basically, when we investigate cases, we have to reach a decision in the case. Are we going to investigate further? First and foremost, we've got to be led by what the customer wants. Good. Are they going to pursue the complaint or not? Inevitably, then we're going to reach a conclusion as to, well, have we resolved the matter? If not, do we feel that we've got any legislative remit to take it further?
Great, thank you. So page 18 it says noise, all additional complaints. So there's a section for all additional complaints, which I thought, I wondered what those were, because it seemed like everything else had been itemised. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to be brief on this, because we are going to have to move on to the next report.
Yeah, and the only other thing was about 5.4.1 was the feed.
Okay,
issue.
so Dave, yeah, are you going to pick this up?
Do you want to do the noise one?
Yes, certainly. Councillor Bond, so we've got the pie chart there, which sets out the top 6 noise complaints. I'm not too sure what your point was about all additional complaints.
It says noise of, all additional complaints. The bottom one, what does that encompass then? Give me an example of what's in that group. If you've got 6 top ones, it's just everything else.
Well, I certainly apologies for my confusion, Councillor Bond. Well, we deal with a whole host of complaints. It could be noise from rail. It could be noise from aircraft. It could be festival noise, etc. So we've probably got 10, 15 categories.
Perfect. Thank you.
Last question.
Yeah, so you're right. The question about feed stuff. So I think the point Gareth Walters is the service manager for this section. I think the point he's making is it wasn't covering the cost of going out collecting a sampling for feedstuffs. So you have farms that mix stuff for animal feed. So that's something that's FSA governed. So we comply with that. And I think the point that Gareth's making there is there's an uplift in the fees to cover our costs, which hopefully is reflected in the reports, that wherever possible we are looking to recover costs, be it at feedstuffs or special procedures, etc. And I think the point he's making there is that was a welcome addition to the resource, and we achieved 92% of that FSA target. If you need any more detail on that, Gareth Walters is the guy to go to, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the replies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Howells, and I'm going to ask everyone to please be brief so we can complete the meeting on schedule. Thank you, Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel, for bringing this report to us. I'd like to personally thank you for, I've been involved with the Event Safety Advisory Group with a couple of events that we've done locally, and I found them very beneficial and very positive in the support that you've given as feedback towards those events that have run very smoothly because of it, probably. And also thank Hugh and his team for the Dog Control Public Spaces Protection Order. I've been involved in some of the work that you've been doing there, and really appreciate that. And also the good news about the air quality. So in Usk, you know, we've suffered long term, but things are improving. I think we all noted that the 20 miles an hour made a difference. It certainly helped. And looking long term to see if that's making an overall picture on Wales. My questions are at the beginning there we talk about the originally this was report was brought to us every 6 months and then changed in 2019 to an annual. I just wonder if that's still appropriate. Is it do we need to revert back to 6 monthly? I'm mindful of sort of resources on that, or are you content with an annual being brought in annually? As Councillor Bond mentioned, in the resources, I was concerned to see the budget for management and generic costs of 50,000 being exceeded by 135,000 on that. I was wondering if there's an explanation for that overspend there. And also on the environmental protection, I noticed that a different way in reporting sort of fly tipping. I was wondering if you could actually explain what that is. I noticed that figures have come down, which is good, but is that just simply the way that we're reporting it? And as you know, I think it's been mentioned before, I noticed that cost resources is a problem. Environmental health report has an increase of 48%, licensing 30% increase, animal health 49%, etc. Does the team have capacity to deliver its duties, really? So they're just my 4 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. And David.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Howells. Yeah, we did make that decision through a former committee about the 6 months versus 12 months. We thought 12 months is more useful and less resource for the officers. It takes a bit of time to collate it. And there's other mechanisms, as Hugh's reflected. We've got service business plans, etc. So it was a decision not just made by officers in collaboration with members of the former committee. So personally, officers are comfortable with that 12-month cycle, with the opportunity for members to come back with any specific issues they may wish to scrutinise. So I think with that proviso, we're happy with the annual setup if that's suitable. Management costs, I think I tried to cover that off with Councillor Bond's question. It is in the narrative underneath. That's specifically the overspend is primarily due to the budget of the head of service, that's me, coming out of the budget. So that had to be put back in. It's sort of in there, hokey time. So it's in there and it came back out. So it is back in there now. So that won't reappear for 24-25 year. But that's the fundamental issue with that 135. So it sounds bad. The 135 overspend. That was the second one. I think over to Hugh for flight tipping. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Councillor Howells. Yes, the council provides a whole host of statistics to Flight Tipping Action Wales. And Flight Tipping Action Wales, excuse me, are keen to set standards so that they can compare local authority to local authority. And on the investigation side of things, just tightened up to make clear that an investigation was actually opening up bags of refuse on site, etc., to see if there's any indication of who was responsible. So that's why there was a reduction in the numbers. Got to bear in mind, during the COVID years, obviously officers weren't too keen to go opening up bags of refuse, etc. So quite a simple, straightforward answer to that one.
Great, thank you.
And then the fourth element was capacity, which is always a challenge, and hopefully that's been reflected in both the report and our summary this morning. It's always is a significant challenge when things go up. But what we try and do is prioritise, which hopefully that's reflected in the report. We will modernise our software system, and that should be pretty significant. And things like SharePoint just saves officer time. So very conscious of the increase in service requests and other service demand. So we try and combat that with doing things a bit more smartly, if you like. Added by sometimes we won't attend to certain things, perhaps we've got to do the statutory stuff, but try and be a bit smarter in terms of how we deal with, be it littering, etc. is always a challenge. Yes.
Great, thank you very much. I see Councillor Pavia, you've got your hand up in the box. Is that a legacy hand?
No, it's not, Chair. No, I have not asked anything yet. No.
Okay. So did have you got a question, Councillor Pavia?
Yes, please. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just obviously thanks officers for their report. In terms of animal health and welfare, the council had a very high profile case last financial year in relation to Lost Soul Sanctuary. I appreciate due to criminal legal proceedings, the officers may not be able to talk about the specifics of this case publicly today, and I completely understand that. But in terms of our job and understanding the performance of the department in implementing our statutory responsibilities, have we undertaken a lessons learned exercise to understand if we effectively discharged our functions at each stage of the process? Just thinking specifically as well in terms of how we communicated what happened with the public. My guess is that the threefold increase in FOI stated in a report is probably largely attributable to this case, and officers will be able to state that in a moment. I've seen a dedicated page on our website, frequently asked questions, etc., but that could have occurred several weeks after the incident, with officers having to field a significant level of inquiries, which obviously takes a lot of resource time, and it's clear that the department has resource challenges. So did we get that communication right with the public, and was it timely? In terms of fair trading and trading standards, I think it was at this meeting last year I raised my concerns about access for vaping products, particularly illegal vaping products for children and young people in the county. I'm pleased to see that we're working with small businesses in terms of what they need to do in terms of educating them about the supply chains, and I assume their responsibilities when it comes to age as well. You indicated in the report 460 items were taken out of the market. I assume that's after spot inspections. So what actions are we taking against businesses that are selling non-compliant or illegal vape or tobacco products, and particularly if they are selling vaping products to underage children? And finally, Chair, there's clearly a link here with organised crime. You're obviously working with Gwent and South Wales Police organised crime units, and it is a growing issue. And given our resource challenges, are we confident that we can keep on top of this issue of illegal vaping products moving forward? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so there's quite a lot there, and we simply need to be able to keep the responses brief because we've got to move on. But please do see if you could respond to those, David. Thank you.
Certainly, obviously, your point about the sanctuary, yes, we can't comment whilst it's under investigation. It has gone initially for plea hearing, so that is they're pleading non-guilty, as you know, it's in the public domain, so we can say that. As you rightly say, we can't comment on the circumstances around that, but certainly a third of those FOIs, I think you were quite accurate, I think that was your calculation, was specifically regarding that one incident. Lessons learned, certainly, is something that's a constant dialogue on that. Everything's been submitted now. I think certainly when it's in the public domain, when it goes to court, clearly, there'll be the opportunity to be open with our communication as to reasons for, which has led to frustration, I understand, with complainants. The questions and answers were done in collaboration with our communications units. We've got to be very careful, legal look at that as well. So hopefully it gives a flavour as to the reasons for and where we're up to on that case. Your second point, forgive me if I miss anything, was about vaping products, which is very topical. Certainly it's something we're taking seriously. We did do two operations to look. We send in someone, I call it sting operation, but it's one of those operations where we do send in 14, 15-year-olds that look older, but unfortunately we didn't get any sales from those operations. They tend to know their regulars, so we're not saying it doesn't happen, but it's unfortunate that they tend to, it's proxy sales, brothers, friends on a housing estate that do it for them. So it is a constant struggle. I think the best thing probably to do in terms of time, if you want specific details as to the vaping, one of our TSOs is specifically dealing with that. It's a national campaign as well. We've got some extra funding. And I think, again, if I can refer you to Gareth Walters, can talk to you about the detail of vaping, the seriousness of it, and what we're doing to try and combat that. And so take your point about organised crime. Again, perhaps if it is around the vaping, illegal cigarette sales, there's reference to a seizure in mega services within the report. again, if I can refer you then, I think to Gareth Walters can furnish you with the detail on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I note in the chat that Hazel has advised that Public Services Scrutiny Committee will be advising you that they would like to look into vaping as a follow-up. Councillor Pavia, were there any follow-up points that you felt were not taken there? So thank you, everybody involved in those responses and in those questions. And we will now move on to move the report. We've considered and commented, and we've noted the breadth of the services provided and any specific areas that we'd like to scrutinise in future. We're going to pick up and follow up following Councillor Bond's point about particular areas that we want to see some relative performance information. So we'll do that as a follow-up. But for this, I move the report, and can I see seconded, which I do. So we will now move on to item 7, which is the Monmouthshire Registration Services Performance Report for 2023-2024. And thank you. So appreciate it. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Jen's going to join us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jen, for waiting and for being patient. Thank you, Hugh and Alan. Great. So, Jen, if you're settled, we'll make a start. And as I say, this is the Monmouthshire Registration Services Performance Report for 23-24. And Councillor Sandals, did you want to make an introduction to this?
Thank you, Chair. The last financial year proved to be another particularly busy year for our registration services team. As per the report, the team covers the registration of births, deaths and marriages. Again, comments from the Scrutiny Committee are welcomed, and officers in attendance will answer any questions from members. On a personal level, I was delighted to attend a recent citizenship ceremony along with Councillor Howells, to welcome people, when he was chair, sorry, to welcome people who have successfully applied to become a British citizen. The ceremony was an absolute a joy. It was a new and uplifting experience for me, and considering the staff in the registration team do many of these ceremonies each year, they made it a really personalised event, and the new citizens were delighted with the way it was all handled. Smiles all round, tea and cakes and photos to record the event. I'd like to express my thanks to the staff who make these events such a joyous occasion for all our new citizens. I'll now hand over to David and Jen to talk you through the main points of the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders, and it's great to hear that extremely important part of the services which you've highlighted. It's not just births, deaths and marriages, it's a more extensive service now. David, over to you. And if I could just remind you, David, we are going to need to contain this to no more than 10 or 15 minutes as a report in total, including questions.
With that in mind, Chair, I'll keep my bit to 2 sentences, and then Jen's obviously the service manager. But yeah, thank you, Chair, members of this committee. Thank you, Councillor Sandals, for that introduction. Just 2 things. It's a people's service. So I think that you just reflected that, Chair. You stole my thunder there. But it does, I think, helpfully sit within public protection as a people's service and social care and health. Often it sits within legal services, seen as a bit of a process, but I think it very much the focus is on people, which hopefully is touched upon in the report. And then just secondly, post putting this report together, we have had a level of assurance from the governing body, the General Register Office, that do monitor us very closely. So just to give you some further assurance that the governing body were pleased with the 23-24 report that was submitted by Jen Walton as our Superintendent Registrar. Thank you. I'll hand over swiftly, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Walton. I'm the Registration Service Manager and the Superintendent Registrar for Monmouthshire. Thank you for those very kind words, Councillor Sandals. It was a pleasure to have you at the ceremony. And as the Head of Public Protection has just set out, we're very much focused on people and on our residents. The work that we've carried out over the past year has been summarised in the table at 4.2 in the report. But obviously there is a story behind every single number in that report. Sad stories and very happy stories, but always a story. We still have a very high level of ceremonies within Monmouthshire over the past year. We seem to be becoming quite a destination for ceremonies, which is lovely. We have people coming from Scotland, London, all around the world, sometimes Dubai as well. So it's very, very encouraging, and it's really good to be able to support all of our local venues and businesses. Obviously, it's a very important wedding industry that brings a lot of money and employment into the county. So we're very pleased to be able to support that as well as our statutory responsibilities for births and deaths. And we continue to have a high level of appointments, very similar to previous years. Although things change obviously every year, we don't have the maternity unit at Neville Hall anymore. So we now have a partnership agreement with the other Gwent districts to register births for them. So we keep up that level of availability for our residents within Monmouthshire, so they're able to come and register with us rather than having to travel to a neighbouring district. Obviously, everything is set out in the report. If there's anything in particular you'd like me to highlight for you, any of the future challenges coming up, or to go into more detail of any of those numbers, I'm very happy to do so.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you very much for the report. And before we move on to the questions, if I could just pick out what clearly is some very good performance in terms of customers seen in time, which is running at 100%, and also those who are looking for an appointment, also running at 100%. So it'd be great if you could just pass back to the team that we recognise good performance when we see it. So that's excellent to see. So we'll move into questions with Councillor Bond, and if I could just remind everyone, we're looking at no more than 3 questions as we go into the questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jennifer. Another great evidence of great work and report. Thank you very much. I just wondered if there was possible, as similar as I've said at the previous report, is it possible to show you've got statutory targets? Would it be possible to say what those are? Is 98% of, and relative to other areas or comparable facilities? Other districts, you say in 4.1 that is compared against other districts nationally, and maybe the UK as well, perhaps offline, as was mentioned before, but it'd be good as a resident to see where we sit versus those other things. And also, is completion of work a useful KPI? So if you're is any of your jobs extend over a length of time, within complete a case within 3 months or whatever, like we saw before? Is that a relevant thing? And I just wonder where the records are kept. Are they kept in County Hall in the archive? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And Jen, did you want to pick these up?
Thank you, Councillor Bond. So yes, I picked that up actually when I was listening to the earlier report, and it is something that I will add into my reports going forward. I do have the figures, I have them available to me of where our performance lies comparable to, across Wales and across the whole of England and Wales. So I can certainly add that into further reports for you. Thank you. All of our historical records are kept in our strong room, which is in the Register office in our building next door to County Hall. And the statutory targets, yes, I can add in the actual targets. So the targets for births, just to let you know, is 99%. So that means registering the birth within 42 days, and for deaths, it's registering within 5 days. And the target for that is 90%. Now, we are very, very long way below that, but at the moment we are in a transition from one process to another. There'll be a new statutory process coming in September, and this transitional period has meant that we just simply aren't able to comply within our usual statutory time frame. So once we get to September and we're into our new statutory process, hopefully we'll be able to make some progress on improving that KPI. So hopefully by next year we'll be seeing that increasing and getting back up to where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Love the feedback as well. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you. Something we'll look at, in the next report, but really appreciate that explanation. Moving on to Councillor Strong.
Thank you for the report. Just quickly to echo the points about the British citizenship ceremonies, I I attended the last one, deputising for the chair. It was absolute privilege to be there. Onto something else. You mentioned on 4.5 and again on 5.2 about the new scrutiny procedures in relation to deaths. I believe that is the need for additional documentation and that things were delayed when you didn't receive it. Just wonder if you could give us a bit more detail on that, but also to let us know, are there any long-term staffing implications caused by what is clearly an additional workload?
Thank you, Councillor Strong. So yes, we are moving to the medical examiner scheme that will become statutory on the 9th of September. It's a new process that's been set up in the wake of the Shipman report. So it's been a very, very long time in coming. But we are now almost sort of getting through the final hurdle. And it will change our role in quite some way, because the scrutiny now, all deaths will now be scrutinised by a medical examiner before the medical certificate of cause of death is prepared and sent to us. So our role in scrutinising that now will be reduced. We don't know exactly what that would look like yet because we haven't seen the actual legislation in relation to that. We are sort of waiting with bated breath to see what that will actually look like, but we know that the statutory scheme will be, and hopefully that process then will be more streamlined because we will know exactly where we are. Everything will be going through that route. So the paperwork will come into us and it will be ready to register, whereas at the moment we're working half with the medical examiners and half without them. So it's a bit more convoluted at this time and trying to work out exactly who's doing what. But yes, from September, that should hopefully be a lot more straightforward. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Perhaps we can have a look at that again when you report next year. We'll have a clearer idea.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Councillor Strong. And over to Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we all love a good story. I do rather envy you with your stories. Is there, it's a very sort of quick one, is there anything that you'd like to see change in the registry department? Anything that flags up that could be done better?
We're always looking to improve what we do and how we do it. It's almost hard to focus on one specific issue because we are constantly in a state of flux. We've got new processes and new procedures and the whole registration service. I mean, it's been in place since 1837 and the last 10 years have probably seen more changes than the 150 years before that. So it's very, very fast changing at the moment. So almost as soon as we're getting used to one way of working, something else is changing. So we're adapting again. So it would be nice once we've got the medical examiners in place so then we can see exactly how we're working and what we need to do, because also looking at the number of ceremonies, there's so many more ceremonies now than there were pre-pandemic. We don't know if that's going to be our new normal or whether that might change going forward as well. So we need things sort of stabilised. So we've got a little bit of time to see where our pressure points are and then to look at what we need to improve and what we can do better.
Always a difficult question, what could we do better, because is that sort of laid as an elephant trap? And I know it's not from Councillor Buckler, but it's a great question because with all our services, we're always going to be interested to know what we might be able to do to help support, improved performance. So thanks very much for that. Yeah, and moving on to finally, Councillor Howells, and your questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing the report. I'd like to echo that as my role as chair, it was a real highlight of the monthly visits to the registry office to welcome the 38 new citizens to this country, but also to this county as well, and the joy that they had for coming here and choosing here. I'd like to sort of, I read the positive feedback on the marriage registrars as well, which I know Linda in our office is one of the registrars, so it was lovely to see that positive feedback that's given to them. I was slightly saddened to read the births within Monmouthshire have now dropped significantly due to the closure of Neville Hall. 3 of my children were born there. And I'm not suggesting we bring a maternity ward back to Monmouthshire, but are there any consequences of not having births registered in Monmouthshire, i.e. birth rates, etc.? You know, is there something we should be considering? I mean, are we going to be seen as barren for no children born in Monmouthshire?
Slightly difficult territory there, I think, Councillor Howells, but well,
so just the one question.
Well navigated. So, Jen, I don't know if you wanted to pick that up.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. All of our information, all of our statistics and details are all fed into the National Statistics Office, which obviously then produce reports on the birth rate throughout Wales as a whole. So yes, if anyone in the future was looking back at the specific areas, they would see that change. I mean, the vast majority of births now are taking place in the Grange in Torfaen. So it's helpful for us that we can continue to register for Torfaen under a partnership agreement with them. But yes, I mean, it would be such a significant difference between one year to another from the hospital closing that I'm sure anyone looking at those figures would look for the explanation and would see it next door. Thank you.
Work for us all there, Councillor Howells, but I think that's all our questions, and therefore I move the report and look for it to be seconded. I think it is being seconded. Yes. So thank you very much for that and for the responses. And just before you finish, I think I'm right in saying, David, that this is you've announced that you're planning on retiring, which seems impossible for somebody who looks as young as you do. But they get younger all the time as I get older. So, you know, but is that correct?
I'm not being dismissive as to what's going to happen next year because I won't be here. These certainly will be picked up by the next. There will be a new head of public protection, so I'm planning to retire in September. But thank
I just thought I'd mention it because this may well be the last occasion that we've got the pleasure of having you with us. And I just wanted to say an enormous thanks to you on behalf of the committee, but more broadly on behalf of those more widely in the council who appreciate enormously that you've brought just years of experience to the role. And frankly, what a test of that experience in the pandemic, where, you know, about 3 minutes notice, the whole council, you at the centre of attention and focus of a lot of that, needed to galvanise the team into doing 1,000 different things that probably nobody had done before in about 3 minutes flat. And I just wanted to say that, you know, the council and we as a committee enormously appreciate that, and what a way to get towards the end of your career with Monmouthshire County Council. So I just ask all members of the committee to please just put your hands together and thank you, David, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Chair and members. That's very nice. Thanks very much.
And we wish you, of course, all the very best in what you move on to do.
I'll have to resign now, Chair. You can't sort of back down on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's too late now. All right. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on. We'll move on to the last part of the agenda, which is, first of all, the thank you again, Councillor Sandals, as well, and to Jen as you move out of the chamber. So the work programme, colleagues on the committee, as we've previously discussed, we've had to jostle them around a bit because something seems to be happening on July the 4th that has necessitated change to dates, and we've reassembled them in the best way we possibly can. Appreciate that that means everyone changing their calendars, and if you could accommodate those changes, that would be, you know, much appreciated. Believe it or not, it's the very best that could be done within a difficult situation. And Hazel, Robert and the team have done an outstanding job just trying to find slots for that. So thank you. It's taken many different goes at it that we didn't bore you with, but a lot of work. So yes, one of the things that we'll pick up from this meeting is those areas that I think, Councillor Bond, you mentioned this. I was happy to support the point you were making. And I think more broadly, that was something that we discussed in the pre-meeting, that there are areas of performance in both the reports that we would like to see some comparative information about. So we have an understanding of how we're doing. It's not on the basis that we think we're not doing well, but it's simply absolute numbers really don't help inform us in that way, and they won't help our members of the public who'd be watching this either. So keeping that in mind. So we'll aim to do some follow up on that, and Robert will make a note of that. We'll follow up and liaise with you on it. Yeah, so moving on to item 9 is the Cabinet and Council Work Planner, which I'm sure you've already got seared into your minds, every date and every time, but it's there as a reminder. And then item 10, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 14th of May. I don't know if you have any points or corrections. It doesn't appear so, so we'll approve those minutes. And yeah, I see a note coming up from Hazel. Please can members pay particular attention to the email and with dates sent yesterday, as the timing of some meetings, such as October, have changed. I can see, Councillor Bond, you've already picked up on that. So just thanks, Hazel, for bringing that to everyone's attention. And great. Also, the people strategy, we were looking for comments. Councillor Howells, thanks for providing those. We've noted your comment in the agenda here for members of the public to see as well. And it was a little bit late for that meeting, but we said we would include it in the agenda here. So thank you for that. And so we have the next meeting on the 11th of July. Gosh, 1 week after the general election. So that's going to be interesting, isn't it? So I look forward to seeing you, if not before, on the 11th of July. But thanks again. Councillor Bond.
Just I've got to give my apologies for that. Sorry, I'm aware I didn't know that was going to be on that date. And also in the plans for the county plans, there's quite a few that got Mark Hand's name on against them. So I wonder if obviously Mark has left now. Wonder if the name, whoever is relevant, should be put in the table of reports to be.
Yeah, it's a great point. It does happen, you know, as people move out, that there is some overlap there, and I'm sure that will be passed on to the appropriate person. But thanks for picking that out. Okay, so I call the meeting to a halt. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments. And Councillor Bond, we did try to make sure everyone went into the Teams box to raise their hands, but I think Councillor Pavey had some problems with that this morning, so not a problem at all. But thanks for everybody for your contributions and your questions. And we'll see you again on the 11th if you can make it. Bye for now. Bye.